Hi, I'm Sam Edith.
And I'm Amy Nelson. Welcome to What's Her Story with Sam and Amy.
This is a show about the world's most remarkable women, their professional and personal journeys.
Together, we'll hear from gold medalists, best-selling authors, and leaders of the world's most iconic brands.
Listen every Thursday or join the conversation anytime on Instagram at What's Her Story Podcast.
Hitha Palepu is the CEO of Rhoshan Pharmaceuticals and an author of 2 books, including We're Speaking, The Life Lessons of Kamala Harris.
You have such a rich family history, and I'd love for you to share it with our listeners.
Yes, I'd be honored to. I am a daughter of Indian immigrants. I am a mother raising who I hope to be feminist sons, and I am the wife of a true partner, and I say in every sense of the word. And truly, it starts with not just my parents, but certainly more progressively minded grandparents who raised each of my parents with a different perspective than traditional Indian values were at that time. My mom rejected several men before she said yes to my dad. So even though it was an arranged marriage, it was very much a marriage based on her terms and her acceptance of it. And the reason she said yes to my dad, I find to be so interesting because he was not the wealthiest. He was not the most financially secure. He was just working in the United States, finally gotten a job in the pharma industry, someone who had lost his hearing as a child and so he struggled a lot to get to where he was at that time, and told my mom the truth about what life in the United States was. He said, it's very lonely. And it is hard. You do have these conveniences like dishwashers and washing machines, but you're growing up in a world where people will rename you. You're living in a world where people will rename you because they can't take the patience to understand your name. You're going to have this culture imposed on you versus being in the culture you yourself had been raised in for years. If that sounds like a life you can handle, I would be delighted to build a life with you, but I want to tell you what you're in for.
Oh, I love your father. He sounds
I do
awesome.
Too. And it was that honesty that had my mom saying yes. They had met on her birthday in 1977 and were married 2.5 weeks later.
And his older brother was one of only 100 Indians in 1 year that was allowed to immigrate to the United States. Can you talk a little bit about that and the impact it had on your family?
Absolutely. So my uncle earned a Fulbright scholarship that allowed him to travel from India to the States to continue studying chemistry. And that was at the time, that was in the late 50s, before the National Immigration Act had been passed, where the cap was 100 visas issued to Indians to come to the United States. And so he was one of very few. And there was no Indian community really at that time. My aunt followed a few years later with her husband, and they in turn were able to sponsor my father to come to the States as well. And once he got here, that was the first time he got a hearing aid, which meant that was the first time he could hear.
Wow. That is amazing. Can I ask a question backing up a little bit about your mom?
Yes.
And you mentioned that, her parents kind of had a different view that was very non-traditional at the time and raising her in India. How did they come to that?
If you ask my grandfather, he would have just said because it's the right thing to do. They at the time, both my parents' families are Brahmin. They're from different subcastes, and my mom is from a more traditionally conservative and traditional subcaste. Yet, my grandfather was delighted for my mom to marry the right man for her, regardless of what subcaste he belonged to. He ensured all of his daughters were educated. So one of my aunts was a professor for many, many years. Another one, she was a diplomat's wife, which is a full-time job, and they lived all over the world. Another one of my aunts, my eldest one, married one of the first Indian physicians to immigrate to the UK. So everyone chose careers based on what they wanted to do, but also built the careers alongside their husbands. And what I find to be so important is that my grandfather could have very easily said, all you're going to be is a wife and mom, but pushed back and said, I want you to be educated. I want you to be able to be independent. I would like for you to contribute to a better world through your actions. And so that sort of sense of this is the right thing to do was very ingrained in my aunts, uncles. Granted, it's interesting that a lot of them have kind of veered back into sort of the conservative nature of that subcaste. Like it was a very big deal for my aunts and uncles that my husband Sri happened to belong to their same subcaste. And I said, aren't you delighted that I found a man that makes me happy and is supportive and wonderful irregardless of this? Like it's a little regressive that this is what you focus on the most, but it also I love my family, and I think we all can understand. We can love our family and be frustrated by some of the things they say, and two things can be true at the same time.
You have an extraordinary confidence. I think it's one of the many things that has made you so successful. Was that embedded in your personality when you were a child as well?
That's my mom's doing. Truly. I mean, this was a woman who, when she was interviewing for jobs in the 70s and 80s, would go in wearing a sari. And when she'd be asked, is that what you're going to wear to work every day? She's like, well, give me the job and then I'll buy some Western clothes appropriate for the workplace. Like this is a woman who, when our train, the train to take us from this temple region in our home state in India, Andhra Pradesh, the region's called Tirupati, the train didn't arrive in time. So she literally hailed down a truck driver and had us like climb into the front of this truck to get a ride back to Hyderabad. My mother is fearless. Like this woman belongs on The Amazing Race. She would win. She would beat everybody.
My late mom always
her,
dreamed of being on The Amazing Race. That's so funny that you say that.
So, I mean, our moms would have been amazing at it, I'm sure. They would have been the team to beat. I think watching her live so fearlessly and say, what's the worst that can happen? They tell me no, was not just an important lesson to be told, but to witness it as my norm on a regular basis that allowed me to have that mindset from a very young age of what's the worst that can happen. My mother also did something else that I find really valuable, and it's something I'm trying to embody with my own kids. And it is rejecting this notion that we could only be one thing. Granted, when I was a kid and wanted to be like a pop star or a jewelry designer and all of these things, my mother would follow it up with, and a doctor, and an engineer, and the more traditional, expectations of an immigrant child. But it was never, you can't do that. She goes, you can do this and that. And I really appreciated that because I think it's the reason that I have found confidence in juggling multiple jobs at the same time, understanding as well, it's going to be hard work and there will be sacrifices and there will be times that you cannot physically do it all, or you're going to have to say offload some things, but that it is possible if you're willing to prioritize and work hard and understand what you're giving up to say yes to some of these things. And she just is that way that it's hard for me to pinpoint specific stories or experiences growing up, but just that it was such a part of what I grew up with, and it was so normalized that I didn't really view like my future any differently.
So you do many things. You're an entrepreneur, you are a speaker, you're an author, you're a mother, and your latest book is called We're Speaking: The Life Lessons of Kamala Harris. And Kamala also has a very strong immigrant mother. What drew you to Kamala's story and wanting to write about it?
I write in the book about how this is a book that I'd actually been writing for a very long time, since I knew who Kamala Harris was and how, she had been mentoring me from afar for many years. So she first came on my radar, during the mortgage foreclosure crisis and the follow-up and the legal follow-up of settlements for homeowners all over the country. So I had a very nerdy obsession with the recession and was like, how did this happen? Why did this happen? what are we going to do to make sure something like this hasn't happened again and citizens are protected? And so this one name kept popping up in the news about it, Kamala Harris, Kamala Harris. And I never took the time to Google her at the time, which I find really funny because I'm the type of person who Googles everything when it comes to my mind. But it wasn't until, she had negotiated a settlement for California homeowners that exceeded what was on the table for the full federal and state responses. She had walked away from the joint negotiating table and brought together allies to fight for a better settlement. And I was on some business trip, had CNN on the background, and saw this woman. I'm like, she could be related to me. Strut to the podium with such confidence. And then the Chiron said, Attorney General Kamala Harris. And I was like, that's Kamala Harris? Because in my mind, I was picturing someone much older, like a lot more with the quote unquote experience that had always been attributed to impactful politicians. And I had no idea she was this relatively young attorney general of the largest state in the union who made a major, major thing happen on behalf of California homeowners. So that the obsession with the recession focused onto his obsession with Kamala Harris. And really, it was in studying how she spoke, what she wore, the way she carried herself. Because at the time, I was working with my dad in a separate company. I was in a lot of rooms where I was the only woman. I certainly was always the youngest, and I was one of the few people of color. And being othered was something that happened to me quite often, and not having the ability to speak up or contribute the way I wanted to. And there weren't a lot of women in leadership and life sciences at the time that I could look to for mentorship or guidance. She became that mentor from afar. So it's not as if I started donning pantsuits and had like a perfectly curled blowout, but she gave me kind of the confidence to wear what I felt good in. And own that.
Reading your book, I felt like you must have felt like you had discovered her, and then suddenly the whole world had discovered her. Was it a little bit like that? Were you like, she's been my obsession well before any of you knew her?
It definitely was. It's like when you know first know of a band or a certain author. It felt very much like that. But I take it personally when I see like just bullshit reporting with like the inflammatory headline, making mountains out of molehills, because it's part of a really troubling trend I observe when the press reports on powerful women. There is like the buildup of hyping her up, the flattering profiles and features. There's sort of the anointment with the covers of magazines, awards, all of that. And then comes the teardown.
Well, and it's also, I think right now it's a lot of the teardown is we don't see her, they're hiding her. And I just had a conversation with Senator Gillibrand about this, and I asked her about that, and she said it's absolutely untrue that she is as visible as any other vice president ever has been. So it's just to your point, it's extraordinary how far that bias goes. I want to talk a little bit about your role as a CEO of a pharmaceutical company. It is so rare, as you said, to have women in life sciences. What was your entry into pharmaceuticals like, and what's that trajectory been like for you?
Well, it started with nepotism, and let's just call out the elephant in the room. I have my job because my father was co-founder of our last company, Cytos. That said, we did have a pretty clear division of church and state in terms of I reported to his business partner, who was the CEO. Joe took me under his wing, taught me everything I needed to know when it came to negotiation and managing partnerships, financial accounting. Our general counsel, Paul Feuerman, walked me through kind of the mechanics of term sheets and licensing agreements and getting comfortable enough with the legalese to know what I can tackle on my own, and confident enough to know when to call excellent outside counsel and how to hire great lawyers as well, which very grateful for Paul for that. Our CFO, Mike Bolio, taught me like how to build a model and the mechanics of this. And I want to just say this, I have had wonderful men who have championed me in industry and given me what I needed to succeed. That said, I was one of the only.
Mm-hmm. One of the only.
And I had to say, why can't our head of manufacturing be a woman? Like, there have to be women candidates out there. Why can't our head of regulatory be a woman? There have to be women candidates out there. At which point they realized, oh, yeah, we absolutely can and we should. So I am grateful that they were. And once we had those team members join us, they helped show me the ropes of how to navigate the gender politics of being in some of these rooms. But I will say
also,
it's
it would be awesome if you could explain to us what happens when you're running a pharmaceutical company. I think for most of us who are not in science, it's like, what does that even mean? And what are you doing every day? And what are you building and bringing to market?
So we're working currently at Rhoshan Pharmaceuticals an injectable aspirin, which will be administered by your EMT or by a nurse in the emergency room. The significance of delivering aspirin in this way is for suspected heart attack or stroke, where preventing the clot from getting bigger within the first hour of clot onset, it could be life or death. They call this the golden hour. So
Mm-hmm.
to safe ours works in under a minute versus oral or rectal aspirin taking a minimum of about 20 minutes to hit the bloodstream. Additionally, with
Wow.
ours, 100% of drug enters the bloodstream versus the 30% because of the gastric effect. So when you think about the urgency of these conditions and the need to deliver this extremely safe therapeutic as effectively as possible and consistently as possible, the need is there. The pricing, you can't price aspirin exorbitantly high, which is why we really struggle to raise venture or get large biopharmas excited about this. But it was a long slog. So to talk a little bit about the history of the company, this is actually something that my dad has been thinking about and working on since the late 70s when he was getting his PhD. His advisor said, Nagesh, whoever develops injectable aspirin deserves a Nobel Prize because, from a chemistry perspective, it is exorbitantly difficult, but
Mm-hmm.
all but impossible to have a scalable manufacturing process and for formulation to stay in a crystalline form. He also then said, also, it would save a lot of lives. So my dad had been thinking about this for years. This was a product that he did start working on at Cytos. And then once we had out licensed the active portfolio from Cytos, he spun this product out and said, I'm going to keep tinkering with it. We're not where we need to be, but this might be my final one. So let me keep thinking about it and working on it on my own without the pressure of working on it with a partner. He successfully got to the lead formulation by the end of, I want to say 2016.
Mm-hmm.
2017, worked with our IP lawyers to file the patents. So we confirmed we had freedom to operate. His patents were novel, non-obvious, and not infringing any other of the aspirin IP that was on the market at the time. And filed those patents that have now since been granted. And then in March 2017, we met with the FDA for the first time to talk about the development plan and specifically the clinical study required for approval. FDA agreed with our approach and gave us a very reasonable clinical study design that allowed us to get approval in a pretty modest study, which that study is just wrapping up. And then we brought on our head of manufacturing at that time, who's been wonderful and a wonderful partner to me. And I will say, we are still, given all this time, and even though we got to skip a lot of steps and that we were formulating something that already existed in terms of the
Yeah.
active drug, we still won't file with FDA for like a year and a half,
When
maybe
you
longer.
when you got into this arena to do this, you understood that it would be a long game, right? And I think for non-entrepreneurs out there, sometimes entrepreneurs start something thinking scale very, very fast to go public or sell your company. But what in you, because you're somebody who moves very quickly in your life in a lot of ways, what in you like made this path okay?
I think if I didn't have, back in the Cytos days, my blog, Hitha on the Go, that satisfied the more immediate gratification
Mhm.
side of me. With Roshan Pharma, it certainly has been 5 Smart Reads and then the book that I wouldn't have been able to mentally handle working on something for years and for progress to be very, very slow.
Yeah.
And it helps for me to have that other career, that other side of me that gets the immediate return on a shorter term investment and keeps me fueled to
Hmm.
handle the very slow pace of drug development. Very slow
Let's
pace.
let's talk about the other side of you. And not I don't want to talk just about we're speaking, but I want to go back to the beginning of writing. So you had a blog called Hitha on the Go. What was the first blog post? Why did you post it? Like what tell the story. Because a lot of times we always think about starting something and then we stop ourselves, right? So particularly when it involves putting it out in the world. It's like what tell us about it.
So in back in 2009, I honestly, the blog was my creative outlet for a non-creative job that I had. And I think that's the origin story for most people's blogs. I My first post was like the Philadelphia Phillies were going back into they're going to the World Series again. I had this like pea-shaped soft pretzel that one of my colleagues had brought to a meeting, and I literally took a picture of that, like a old grainy iPhone picture, and wrote like why I love baseball and why I love the Phillies. Like
That's
that was
amazing.
the first post. And I actually like remember that pretzel being so delicious, and now I really want like a Philly soft pretzel. And I mean, that's what the original posts were. Terrible photography, very much stream of consciousness writing. But it wasn't until like I had been on the road for consistently for a couple of years and had found different solutions for packing, because it would be usually multi-city trips in a carry-on because I was traveling with all men. There was the concept of checking in a bag was foreign. Like
Not happening.
no one was
Yeah.
going to wait for me at baggage claim. So I started sharing, these tactics that I had developed that worked for me. And that was also kind of the early days of Pinterest, where content could go viral very quickly and it didn't have to look a certain way or be perfect. It was just about what caught your eye and addressed a
Hmm.
problem. So I benefited from that immediately and having a lot of those early packing posts going viral and me
Hmm.
going, no one is talking about this, like how to pack from how most people travel in terms of a few business trips a year, a few vacations a year, maybe some
Hmm.
road trips. It was always from the like quit your job, sell all your belongings and live
Right.
out of a backpack. So that gave me an opportunity to just build a niche and become a leader in a niche for myself. And as that traffic grew and my community grew, I really went deeper into travel and interviewing other people I really admired who spent a lot of time on the road on their packing and travel habits, offering up more travel tips, learning how to do Photoshop and create these beautiful packing list collages and outfit guide collages, which I mean, that was like Pinterest gold back in the day. So that helped
Hmm.
with both discovery and kind of content that people were looking for. And to this day, I still share some of those posts when people are like, I'm packing for this. What should I wear? And I'm like, I actually wrote something about that. Here you go.
That's
And
amazing.
that's Hitha on the Go, and really focusing it as a travel resource is what caught my first publisher, Clarkson Potter's eye to write How to Pack. Oh, I actually was approached to write How to Pack the day I came home from the hospital with Ro. So I remember just being like very tired, like, what is happening? I had my husband like Google, like, look at this email and be like, is this for real? Can you Google this person and make sure this is a real opportunity? And it was. And I actually sold the book off basically the blog and got an offer letter before I even had an agent. And so I am a very, very lucky author because the same thing happened for We're Speaking. And my agent is just like, well, let's hope HarperCollins or Simon and Schuster calls soon, and then you can get the hat trick for big pubs, like major publishers, just coming to
Right.
you to write these very specific books.
Sam, we can't hear you again. Yes.
Now it's working.
What does a day in the life of a pharmaceutical CEO look like?
It looks different every day, much like any CEO, and it really depends on what we have going on at any specific time. But also, as I've been able to hire a bigger team, what I do is significantly less than what I used to do. So, for instance, right now we're wrapping up a clinical study. So, it's about scheduling calls with our partners to get them the full update on how the final dosing and the final subjects have gone. For manufacturing, it's making sure my head of manufacturing and our technical team what they need to work with the new partner. So it meant getting a three-way CDA signed and managing the back and forth with our lawyers and everyone else's lawyers and partners on that. And then for me right now, it's managing the licensing, like the partnership with the team that licensed our product. So I speak with their senior team members every single week. We have an overall catch-up joint committee meeting every few weeks. And it's making sure the partner is informed of everything that's happening and is happy with everything that's happening. So relationship management is my job, but before that, it was securing funding. So a lot of investor pitches, a lot of no's, and a lot of retooling the pitch, refining my list, and getting back out there. When we were negotiating the licensing deal, it was a lot of time with my lawyers to understand the red lines and get that legalese education, and to think really thoughtfully what is non-negotiable for us and what can we accept with maybe some caveats or edits. So right now I am thrilled that my team is really taking the lead on development and on building relationships with their technical team. And my job is really it's much more focused, and the stress of managing cash flow or understanding like when is our next tranche of capital coming in, how am I going to afford to pay my team, is significantly decreased today than it was a year ago.
Amazing.
That's great. And what's it like working with your father?
It is the best. However, I will say that I think family businesses, it's like very binary. It's either phenomenal and a perfect fit, or it is the worst idea ever. And I don't see there being much of an in between. It is truly an honor and a privilege to work with someone who I view as one of the most brilliant scientific minds of our time. And especially in life sciences, you could have a brilliant formulator who none of his formulations or her formulations could get scaled up to be a commercial product. You can have someone who is so smart about scaling up manufacturing, but then you're giving up some of the elements of the formulation that made it, soluble, stabilizable, or, diminishing the quality of the product. And then on top of it, you need to be able to develop a formulation that can get a patent granted on it. And right now, my father is batting 1,000 when it comes to defending his patents against infringement or invalidation cases. So he really is a triple threat in drug development, but he's also just one of the best people I know. We have been a remote company since Cytos. We've had a remote culture since the beginning of Cytos. We've never been the type of company to require people to be in an office, but we did prioritize getting together on a regular basis to not let things go too far without gathering live and building relationships with people. He is someone who has such humility about what he is doing. Like, he understands that I'm doing this to help save lives.
Well, it sounds like that Nobel Prize is still within reach.
I hope so. And even if it isn't, the number of people who are still walking this planet because of the drugs my dad had a small part in developing, had a large part in developing, that's what keeps him going. He's like, I don't know if I'm ready to retire. Maybe we'll start Rakesh Therapeutics. And I am like, I'm not going to have any more babies, so this will be our last company if that's the case. But we're also, if we do another company, and even with this company, we're a lot smarter about the reality of running a startup. and what we would do differently in a next iteration versus what we did with Rhoshan Pharma. And it has been just one of the great honors of my life to get to work and build companies with him that have hopefully impacted humanity for the better.
I want to switch gears and ask you about your hair. You are one of the few women I know in our age cohort. You're probably even younger than me. I don't even know how old you are. I just know that you have let your hair go gray and you do it with such style and it looks beautiful on you. And I feel like you've probably influenced so many other women to do the same. I know when I see you, I'm like, oh, why can't I pull that off? That looks awesome. So, can you talk about that decision and what that's like?
I decided to go gray right around the time I delivered Rocky. And so my roots were already starting to grow out. And that was the first time I was like, I kind of like these little sparkles of silver versus the dread of, oh my God, I need to get back in the salon. And I'm someone who naturally has a lot of gray hair, even at a young age. It is the Palepu gift, I suppose. This is very consistent with my father's side of the family. And I just decided, what does like modern gray hair look like? So in those very, and I think both of you remember this, your brain does really funny things when you're nursing in the middle of the night. So I would be on like the internet Googling like gray hair styles, gray hair young women, gray highlights, all of this, and found a lot of really like cool, seeing some women who had embraced it in such a modern way that in one Allure article, a colorist from Bumble and Bumble downtown was mentioned. So I found her on Instagram and like slid into her DMs, and I was like, I really love the hair you did for this woman. I wanted to see if my hair would be a good fit. So she's like, come in. I actually need to see your hair. I need to see you, and like do a bleach test to see how light you can get your hair, because if you've been coloring your hair, like your roots, and coloring it all black for years, I may not be able to do as much if this was sort of native hair. So I appreciated her honesty, one, and two, made her way downtown, got a strip test done. She was like, I think I can lighten it a fair amount to get you to like a charcoal gray. And I said, that looked cool. And she matched sort of the growth profile. So as it grew in, it looked like it matched. So I did these like gray highlights and lowlights in my hair, I want to say September of 2015. No, I don't know how old my children are. This is terrible. 2019. And then I never really looked back since. I went back to my roots, literally, did a lot of like Indian oil scalp massage to recondition the grays that were coming in, to soften them from that wiry texture they usually are to like a really softer, like my usual hair texture. Was very diligent about that. Was very diligent about getting glosses so that the gray didn't become overly brassy, and have just maintained it to now, about 3 years later. Like, there is no more highlight left of that. It is just my hair. And it feels so me. It feels so good. And it's the first time in my life I actually really like my hair. And I like that part of me versus, having more frizzy, thick, unruly Indian hair that I would beat into submission with straightening irons and like straightening treatments and all of that. I've kind of learned to really like this part about myself. And I think it helped me like other parts of myself more, from embracing my very distinguished nose, and liking just all the parts of me that normally I would beat myself up about.
Can we talk a little bit more about that? I mean, you've written a lot and spoken a lot about your relationship to your name. And we talked about it, I think, at the very beginning of our conversation today. What was your relationship with your name growing up and that part of you?
I mean, when you're growing up a brown kid and one of the only brown kids in your class in school, and your name ends with poo, you're going to get some really creative insults hurled your way. I think someone called me Hitha Palepu, and I came home wanting to change my name. And again, my mother, in her infinite wisdom and confidence, said, like, your name, this is why we chose your name. And your name is beautiful. Your name is strong. These people are deeply unkind. And obviously, something is bothering them that they feel the need to take this out on you. And really, my mom needs to write a book because she really is a genius. But also, that has also influenced kind of thinking about, where do I want to raise my family? What do I name my kids?
Hmm.
And, it was one of those sort of, it builds character experiences that while I endured it and I grew from it, it was something that I wouldn't choose for my own children. So, living in New York City, where 30% of my older son's class is South Asian, which is something, a critical mass I certainly never had, is something that I find it is so different from what I grew up with, but it's also exactly what I'd like to give my kids that I didn't have. And, that they have their Indian full names, but these westernized nicknames that, one, makes it easy to pronounce, but two, have their own meaning for our own family is special to us. And, your names are a gift from your family, from your parents. It's the first gift any of us ever receive. So we are very reverent about names. And with the kids too, it's teaching them to always ask what someone's name is and take the time to learn how to pronounce it properly, because that is the first form of respect you ever show anyone.
Wow.
Did you cover how Hitha met her husband?
No,
Okay.
we haven't talked
So,
about that at all.
then we're gonna have to go the speed round because we're running out of time. But so tell us how you met your incredible husband.
We met at an Indian networking conference in Canada. And even though it was in Canada, neither of us are Canadian, or were living in Canada at the time. Just we were both members of this organization, him from the national chapter leadership perspective, me as the chapter liaison from Philadelphia. I was late to the board meeting. He came up to me after the board meeting and said, I haven't met you yet. And I said, no, you haven't. I'm Hitha. We talk, flirt for a bit, go our separate ways. The next day he comes back around and comes up to me, and I'm very excited because I'm like, cute boy from yesterday. Yes. And he's like, hi, I haven't met you yet. And I was like, excuse me, Srinaarasimhan, I met you yesterday. Did you go through all 400 women at this conference in a single night that you're now recycling lines? Well done, you. And stormed off. And so for the rest of the conference, he just like was kind of chasing me down to apologize. But when anytime we got into a really great conversation, like a woman would come up to him and be like, Sri. And I was like, what is going on here? Like, is he into me? But all these women are chasing him. Apparently, he was like the bachelor to get at this conference.
Oh my God, that's really funny.
But anyway, it was one of those. There was this moment. It was the Saturday night of the conference. We were talking, it was at a club, Solarium. If it's still there in Toronto, I feel like I need to go back and like pay my respects to this to this very important venue in our relationship. And we were there was something about how I mentioned like my vision is so bad. It's like, too bad if we lived in Gattaca, like this would be resolved. Or I mentioned something, it's like, my poor kids are going to be totally blind. He's like, well, not if we live in Gattaca. And I was just like, oh my God, you're my soulmate. You are a nerd who is also partially blind and gets me, and didn't shy away when I like dropped kids in the conversation very early on. Instead made this really funny, completely spot on reference. So, we were engaged 5 months after we met. We got married 10 months after that, and it's been 11 years of marriage.
Wow, that's amazing. How did you name your sons?
So I really love the Jewish tradition of honoring family that has passed with either the first letter or with the name. And I had just lost two uncles on both sides of my family in the years and months before Ro was born. So I wanted an R name to honor both of them. They were Raju and Raghu. But I didn't want those names because they're very common names. And we wanted unique names that maybe our family didn't have. So Roshan was actually mentioned at a family dinner with my husband's family. That was always in the back of my mind. And we were like, but let's like think about spelling and pronunciation and nicknames. So both of us are scientists by education. So the Greek letter rho has significance in that. So we were like, Ro is a really cute nickname. And so we decided to change the traditional spelling of Roshan, which was Roshan, to Rhoshan to be a little bit more phonetic. And then with Rocky, we named him Rocky first because he was treating my bladder like a speed bag. And we were like, what Indian name works with this? So Rakesh came to mind. And we did the funny thing with the spelling too, because we had gotten Roshan's name as his own URL. And we were like, if we get this for one kid and not another, we're going to be in trouble. So we got him Rakesh, the way we spelled it, Rhakesh. So our kids are very lucky in that, like, they have all their social media handles. They have like a URL with their first name. I'm very jealous of them in this
Watch
one
them be
regard.
like very private introverts who want like no public presence.
I mean, I think Ro is going to follow in my footsteps. Like, I see it. We got him this little like vlogging camera for the holidays last year. And the way he like goes into an intro and an outro, like a full on like YouTube star, I'm just like, oh my God. Like,
Oh, wow.
the student has become the master, and I didn't even teach you how to do this.
What is
Rocky,
what is the vlogging camera called?
it's like the VTech like camera. I will
Okay.
send you a link to it. It is really fun. It's easy for kids to use. And what I like about it is like they're not grabbing my phone and potentially calling investors or partners, and like
Yeah, been
need
there.
to be aware of that. So or and then, we got him a little adapter for one of his iPads, so he'll take the video content, transfer it, and edit like a video on iMovie. And I'm just like, can you like edit my TikToks for me? Like, this would be great.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
I mean, it would just end up having like a voiceover of Rose saying diarrhea over and over and over again. So I will not outsource that to him, but it is fun to see how your kids pick up on what you do and how they kind of make it their own. So watching that has been really amazing. Rocky just knows where a camera is at any given time and is like posing and like smiling and like knows his angles, which I'm just like, who are you children? But it's fun to watch them become the people they were always going to be, and just hopefully nudge them into the right direction and provide boundaries for safety, but like watch them flourish. It's one of the greatest gifts, truly.
There's
Amazing.
actually
I
an
think we have
amazing set of lyrics from a song that I put in my newsletter yesterday about parenting. I'm going to forward it to you because I think it's very similar to what you just said. Yeah, and it's great philosophy. All right, we're going to have to go to our speed round now. Aim, do you want to kick us off?
Yes. I'm more excited to ask you this than I think I've ever been excited to ask any of our guests. What book are you reading?
A couple, because I'm a promiscuous reader and I'm always juggling multiple books at the same time. So I am listening to Tunde from Peloton's new memoir, which is excellent, right? So far, I'm loving it. I am rereading the A Court of Thorns and Roses series because it brought me great joy at the beginning of the year when we were all locked down for the Omicron variant. And I just need to bring back some familiar joy into my life. And then Ro and I are reading a series called Wings of Fire. So there's a graphic novel version that he has the first 5 books for, but I really want him to also get used to reading or reading with me the full novel version. So we're making our way through that, and it's actually excellent. I'm very
Yeah,
much
two of my
enjoying
kids
it.
love that series. That was a great series.
It's a great series,
Yeah.
and that's been really fun. So juggling those 3 books right now.
Amazing.
You are such a positive person. How do you get out of a bad mood?
I have to give myself some time to wallow, so I don't try to push out of it too fast, but I do put a limit to said wallowing where I will listen to the music I need to listen to, and I will like lie in bed or on my couch like a lump and just stare at the wall for a bit. And I'll cry if I need to. I think a good cry can be very cathartic. And then once
Mhm.
that timer goes off or that limit is done, it is tackling one really small tactical project that makes me feel like I have that win, which lately has been going through all like the drawers in my room and organizing it. So like I did that with my undergarments drawer last week. I felt like a new person. I'm going to tackle my socks like next because I have a lot of socks that just need to be get like tossed with holes and are worn out. That helps. I will also do, I call it like a tea meditation where you make a cup of tea, but rather scrolling on your phone or listening to a podcast while you're doing it, you actually engage all five of your senses while you're making the tea. So you listen to the kettle hitting a boil, you smell the tea as the hot water hits it and the aroma it gives off, you feel the heat of the mug. And so I kind of call that active or passive, like a meditation and like in living. So I'm not someone who does great with just sitting on a cushion in silence for 20 minutes. This is a way I'm able to kind of just come back to myself and give myself the grounding and centering I need. And then I'll try to get outside, even if it's for a quick walk around the block or even going into the park a little bit and sitting on a bench for some time. I think getting outside and actually changing your environment can really help shift your mood when you're ready to move on from it. And I think like something Tinks, an influencer on TikTok, does is she throws like a funeral for, dates that didn't go anywhere and they never followed up or exes. I like to think of throwing a funeral for a moment of disappointment, particularly if it was something I was really hoping for, like an investor who I had been in conversations with for months coming with a no or a no from a potential partner. I think creating a small ritual of just saying, here lies so and so, may they rest in peace, giving you that closure and letting you put the final nail on that coffin versus it feeling like it had been done to you is a way to
Mhm.
reframe and kind of take control back of those disappointing moments.
That's so amazing. Um, what it, uh, who leaves you starstruck?
I mean, besides the vice president herself, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, I think she was my first political crush. Secretary Hillary Clinton, of course. Um, Women politicians, clearly. Democratic women politicians leave me quite starstruck. And then I would say, Stacey Abrams too, who I got to meet at the Riveter Summit, and I met Vice President then Senator Harris later that night. So really, I view November 7th, 2019, as one of the greatest days of my life, and that was like a day all my dreams came true. So thank you for that.
Oh man, thank you for being a part of it.
What is your favorite beverage?
Sparkling water with lemon.
All right. Well, Lou Burns has been listening to this entire conversation, and he comes in at the end of each podcast with one big question. No pressure, Lou.
No
Go for it.
pressure. Thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you for
I'm
having
so
me.
honored to be in rooms like this. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Stacy. So and Sam. Um, this has been so refreshing. All I could think about is like I was wanting them to ask this question so badly because of the light that you are. I'm raising a 13-year-old going on 30, and she is challenging to say the least. And you made a comment about the kids when you were growing up, how the kids made fun of your name. I want to know, like, when you were like in your 14, 15, 16, and maybe even high school years, what was that like for you? Were you like a student athlete? Were you like in politics? How were you as a kid?
So I had a really rough eighth grade. We had just moved to the UK. I was in a new school in England. And I had always been aware of privilege and how much I had, But this was the first time being around extremely wealthy people that made me feel less than. And was pretty badly bullied. It was a really, really, really hard year. Mercifully, it was also a school with a lot of turnover. So my beginning of ninth grade was a much different experience with new friends and new people who joined the school that saw me for who I am and liked me for me. So that helped. And then I had 2 more schools my freshman year of high school. So by the time I got to 10th grade, I was tired of 1, moving, and 2, having to make friends. That I found these 2 incredible women in my high school, Stacy Eady and Rachel Mendel Rice, who were equally nerdy as I was about politics. Like, we would sit on long lunch days on Wednesdays, order a pizza from Domino's, and sit around and pontificate about like the state of the world and politics. Like, we couldn't vote. There was very little we could actually do, but I felt finally like I had found my groove. And with that came joining the debate team, joining theater, joining the school newspaper. I don't know if my parents nudged this or if I found my way here, but finding community in things I cared about really, really helped. And I didn't care so much about what other people thought or of me or of what was quote unquote cool, because I had a very clear sense of what these people find to be cool is not at all aligned with what I care about. And so I'm just going to release myself of that burden or expectation. I also think having the mom I did, who always beat to her own drum and modeled that for me and encouraged me to do the same, gave me that confidence to resist but if it's to try to fit in or to be kind of in the same narrative as other people. So I'm really, again, so grateful for my mom for being that person, but also grateful for my parents when I said I come home and be like, I just joined the school newspaper. I just joined the debate team. I just did this. And debate was demanding because you spent all day Saturday at tournaments at high schools all over your state. Like, your day began at like 6 a.m. and you'd get back at like 9 to 10 p.m. So you had to go to bed early on a Friday night. On Sunday, you're catching up with homework and getting ready for the rest of the school week. So, I mean, unwittingly, I think they just were like, thank God this woman is a nerd and found the nerdy activity that keeps her out of trouble on the weekends that a lot of high schoolers might find themselves in. But I honestly don't know if this would have been the case if I hadn't found Rachel and Stacy at that time and fell into this really incredibly rich, deep, authentic friendship that remains today. So Rachel now lives in Seattle. She was my moderator for one of the Seattle book events, and it just was so incredible to be sitting with her, you know, at this beautiful venue talking about this book, but that it felt like nothing had changed.
Thank you so much for being on the
You know, Sam, it's really funny. When we invited Hitha onto the show, I was trying to remember when I met her, and I couldn't, because Hitha's one of those people that once you meet her, you feel like you've always known her, because she's so willing to share every piece of herself, the hard parts, the good parts, the ugly parts, the beautiful parts. And there aren't many people like that in the world.
And by the way, you know how my background is in personal branding. I think she is so smart about how she's managed her career and her brand. And, you know, I did ask her about her gray hair because it's true. She is so youthful looking with gray hair. She just pulls it off in a way I've never seen anyone pull it off. But on top of that, I think it's so adorable and sort of disarming that she talks about her love of Taco Bell and romance novels, because it makes it so that anyone can find something in common with her. And it's something I encourage everyone to do on their Twitter, Instagram bios, saying something that just makes you a little more approachable.
She actually got me to read my first romance novel. And whenever I do eat Taco Bell, because my kids love it, I think of her. Thanks for listening to What's Her Story with Sam and Amy.
We would appreciate it if you'd leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, connect with us on social media at What's Her Story Podcast.
What's Her Story with Sam and Amy is powered by my company, The Riveter, at theriveter.co, and Sam's company, Park Place Payments, at parkplacepayments.com.
Thanks to our producer, Stacey Para, and our male perspective, Lou Burns.